Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for making it to our session. This is one of the first parallel sessions, and it's supposed to be a bit more technical than the others. This session will talk about the next generation of public services, which is what we will be looking at is something that we've already heard about a little bit earlier in the plenary, going towards the next phase of digital government. You've heard a lot about the Interoperable Europe Act. You heard a lot about how we're trying to make public services seamless, user-centric. And what could be the next phase of government? Is that what we're coming towards, which we heard is invisible government that will actually provide proactive, automated services? That's what this session will explore with a wonderful panel of great speakers that I'm very, very pleased to call up on the stage. So, colleagues, if you can just give me the line up here, I'd like to ask Mikko Mattinen, Director at Digital and Population Data Services Agency in Finland. Thank you. Pedro Viana, who comes from Portugal from the Justice Secretary of State Cabinet. David Blanchard, my dear colleague from the Commission, Deputy Head of Unit responsible for the Single Digital Gateway. Tony Shannon, who is here from Ireland. He's Head of Digital Services in the Office of Government. And then Mark Boris Andrianic, who is the Governing Board member of the European Institute for Innovation and Technology, but he's also got several other hats. So please give a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you. And I just want to remind you that there's, of course, always the possibility for posing questions through Slido to us. So please use that opportunity if you want the speakers to address those. Otherwise, we'll start our discussion. So as I said, we are perhaps at a new momentum in digital government transformation. I think we've now seen that really we are looking at a moment where you have legislations in place that really enable the digital transformation according to EU values and principles. We've got to implement them, and that brought also with us the technological change which allows us to provide public services and manage the internal procedures of governments in a much more efficient way. So what's coming after? What is the next phase of government? If you look at the government benchmark, I cannot really reveal the next one because that's only going to be published on Tuesday next week. But if we look at last year's figures, we know that 84% of public services are fully online. So we're getting there. Right? But are they all user-friendly? Are they all available for every user across the border without any discrimination of where they may come from? Are they also proactive? If you look at that, we know that only 68% of those services using pre-filled forms, which have been discussed for ages, for the past couple of years and even 2 decades. And then only 7% of those are actually proactively provided to citizens. We heard earlier, that citizens may not or cannot or do not want to use digital public services. And what if we really had the ability to actually know what those public services are going to be, what the citizen will be entitled to get? Right? If somebody delivers, if somebody has a new child and registers that child, you should be entitled for child allowance. That's your right. So government should know that and should just proactively contact you and then ask you, is this the bank account you still have where I can start submitting you that child allowance? So if we go towards that, then it doesn't matter if citizens don't have the skills. They don't need to bother about that because the service is delivered to you. What we want to also discuss here is, yes, do you already look at that as a next phase, or do we still need to work on the basics? And what we'd also like to see is, if we go towards this vision, what are the kind of building blocks needed? What can us together, jointly, which we heard about, develop to make that happen? as either as an interoperability building block, a digital government building block? If they're not there, what should be those that will be important to develop? So let me first start by asking each of you, and you've kindly sit in the right order, so that's perfect, to explain to us the organization you're from. And what exactly do you work on that's really relevant for interoperability and digital government in your organization? Mikko.
Yeah, hey, super interesting question. So currently we are building, there's a state agreement between Finland and Estonia, and we are kind of like duplicating the population data registries between the countries. That's an ongoing project. And then we have a cross-border digital services initiative between Finland, Sweden, and Norway, which is fascinating, of course, from my point of view. We have 3 different proof of concepts where we deploy different technologies, emerging technologies such as AI. But the one that we are truly interested is the API kind of like approach, that how we could exchange the information between Finland, Sweden, and Norway. And that's the essence of, you know, developing the services. As we all know, internet wouldn't exist without the interoperability. So interoperability of the, you know, the state data, or however you want to express it. So that's something that we are very excited currently up in North.
Thank you, and it's absolutely, you are one of the big examples of interoperability by design, because you've been working so closely together with those Nordic countries. Thank you so much. I come to you, Pedro. Can you just explain which organization you work for and what your specific link to interoperability and digital government is?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much all for the invitation, for being here. I met wonderful people yesterday at night that were in these sessions yesterday, and they are very enthusiastic, and I loved it. It's been a great pleasure to be here. So I used to work at the National Agency for Modernization in Portugal. We were working on strategy, implementing building blocks, and recently I made a change. I'm working in the Justice Ministry. The Justice Ministry in Portugal, we don't have only courts, we have also the registries, almost all base registries, and we provide more than 200 services, and some of them we have to provide, for instance, the moment you are born. And for doing this, we have to be able to interchange information quickly, to provide easy ways for any kind of parent to, for instance, to have his child at the very right moment he is born, registered with a citizen card. So this is an example. Of course, in court, we have lots of other issues. We want to provide judges, for instance, access to information to the citizens they are dealing with right away, so we can speed up the decisions on court cases. So we are very keen in interchanging information between entities on justice, entities on other public entities in Portugal, but also with other entities in Europe. For a matter of fact, we are talking about the weather, and we should be moving north and south. We think this will be a scenario in the future. So we have to be prepared. If someone is going to Portugal, is going to need a digital service, someone from the north, someone from any other country in the European community, we must be able to deliver this service right away and easily, and that is our challenge in justice.
Thank you, and it's really, you are holding access to many of these registers in the Justice Ministry, so I know that you have a big impact to make. David, where do you work? And what do you work on that's related to digital government?
Hi, Andrea, and good morning, everybody. Yes, I'm from the Commission, from DG GROW, which is the acronym for the Directorate General in charge of internal market, industry, SMEs in particular. And in our unit, we are responsible for the single digital gateway. Don't know to what extent you're familiar with a single digital gateway, but it sets a one-stop shop for access to information relevant for people and active in the EU, in the single market. It's also a framework for administrative procedures, and procedures have to be fully online and also accessible to cross-border users. And I would say the last pillar is the once-only technical system that we have established and that will allow the automated and cross-border transfer of evidence needed for administrative procedures. So that's what we are responsible for, and we work in partnership with DG, by the way, so it's not only DG Grow, but we are responsible for that. And to answer also your questions, I would say that this instrument, the single digital gateway, from our perspective, is absolutely crucial for a couple of reasons. It's a major tool for a better functioning internal market, because of course rules and procedures are, I would say, clearer for users. It's a major modernization tool of public administration and public services. And that's something which is absolutely key, in particular in terms of digital transformation. And it's a major also competitiveness tool, because it reduces admin burden, complexity. So that's why it's fundamental. And coming to the interoperability dimension, I would say that whenever we implement the SDG, we are building an interoperable Europe. By the way, the regulation setting out the single digital gateway was adopted in October 2018. And by definition, by nature, this regulation is, I would say, a sort of predecessor of the Interoperable Europe Act. So by definition, we are working on interoperability, and the SDG, I would say, already builds on many principles that define the Interoperable Europe, user centricity, once-only principle, and so on.
Absolutely, and then really it's one of the key first steps towards this cross-border digital public services with the once-only principle at its heart. So it's a key to success for interoperable public services in Europe. Tony, what is it that you work on in Ireland? What is the main focus that's related to digital government and interoperability?
Sure, thanks again, and thanks for the invitation to be here. Just briefly before I explain the work I'm currently doing, my own personal interest in semantic interoperability stems back from my time as a physician, emergency physician, where I've seen interoperable solutions really have an impact in people's lives and saving lives. So that's partly how I ended up doing the work that I'm doing. The work within the Office of the Government CIO, we work on public service transformation. And I think our team would say, you know, we recognize this is a moment that matters in the world. COVID taught us that the government has a really important role in people's lives. We have to kind of stand up and lead the change that we're involved in this decade of digital and green. And we're doing that through what's called the Better Public Services agenda. And in that Better Public Services push, it's around building better solutions for people in a more sustainable way for the planet, and also doing it with an understanding that we're not just addressing a complicated problem here, we're addressing a complex problem. And if you understand the complexity of interoperability or change at that kind of level, the key thing to talk about is patterns. And the patterns we can talk about that we're working on are principles around people and process and information technology. We are very much putting the user at the center of the design of our solutions, and we are pushing for an approach orientated around life events, supporting our people from cradle to grave when they need us. And in an agile way, the process is an agile approach, so an iterative approach as we're developing as we go. And then the technical underpinnings of that, really we would explain as a kind of building blocks and an open source approach to the key building blocks, of which there are not that many that are required, but they are effectively the basis of the digital decade, digital public goods, digital public infrastructure for the century that we're all building at the moment. And we're just, beginning to play our part in that. And I'll follow up maybe later with some more detail on how we might do that more collaboratively.
Thank you. And indeed, the live event approach is really an absolutely logical way. This is also how we're looking at, for example, those key public services being online according to the digital decade. Mark, I mentioned the IT, but I probably should have said you were a former minister in Slovenia for digitization. So in whichever capacity, where you work right now, what are the kind of areas you focus on that have to do with digital government and interoperability?
Thank you, Andrea, very much for this excellent question and for organizing this very exciting event. I have a little announcement to make regarding the questions from the audience. We already decided that we'll only take the friendly ones. But on a more serious note, I'm passionate about European innovation, GovTech, and AI. I sit on the board of the European Institute of Innovation and Technology, which is a long name for a European Innovation Agency. We are the body of the EU that brings together some of our leading companies of all stages, some of our best universities, and many of our best research institutions to basically supercharge innovation across various fields across the entire Union. So this is our mission. We do that, through a variety of programs that stretch from funding startups and scale-ups all the way to educating entrepreneurs, life scientists, and so on. So we have a variety of activities that I'm sure any of you can take part in. And one of my key ambitions has been to basically carve out a little piece of EIT also for GovTech. Now, as we all know, Europe is not really good at many areas of technology. In most areas, one can say that we're lagging behind. But in the area of government technologies, I firmly believe that Europe is top of the world. And this is an area that's not just our comparative advantage, but it's also, an area that we need constantly investment in. And that's why EIT is basically dedicating more and more resources to make sure we empower European startups to get into this important sector, which is not easy. We all know governments move slowly. Sales cycles are very, very long. So the startups in this area need a lot of support from the institutions like the EIT and many others. And I'm glad to say that this support is increasing. We have identified our niche. The second area that I'm passionate about is a foundation called Digitality, of which I'm co-founder. And this foundation's mission is basically to export and promote the best European GovTech solutions around the world. Currently, we're focusing on exporting and implementing Ukrainian government app Dia, which is arguably one of the best in the world. You may not know that, but Ukraine actually made greater advances in the area of digital transformation of government during the wartime than most European countries in decades of peace. And their government app, Dia, is second to none. It looks like it's been designed by Apple. You can do literally any public service from your own pocket, and it's just terrific. And it's an example of a service that can easily be replicated and scaled, not just across the Union, but also more broadly in our neighborhood and other continents. And I think this is the biggest beauty of digital technologies. They can be scaled almost at zero cost. Dia is, by the way, today open source, and Digitality is dedicated to working with countries in Europe and around the world to make sure many tens or even hundreds of citizens can have their fingers on the world's most advanced government app.
Thank you. And I think some of you who are following us on different events, you may remember we did see Dia on stage at one of our events, I think 2 years ago, and it's really impressive. And I'm really glad you brought up also GovTech. That's very close to our heart, obviously bringing innovation into government. But also one of our recent studies shows that the GovTech market in Europe could be as big as 9 billion euros. And I think there is a win-win situation bringing that innovation into government, helping these European companies to strive. So I'm glad you mentioned that. So now I'd like to come back to you looking at, okay, what could then this next phase of digital government look like? And I will now mix the order a little bit. I was wondering, perhaps starting with you, David, what do you think the next phase of the single digital gateway will be? And what is it that you have in mind, both in terms of planning, but perhaps also concrete implementation?
Yes, thank you, Andrea. That's a very good question. I can only give a couple of elements because as far as the future is concerned, so we have to continue discussing with member states in particular. Last March, we had a high-level conference on the SDG 2.0. Mm-hmm. And for us, it's, I would say, a sort of code name, 2.0, and that we can structure a bit the ideas for the future. But during this conference, there were a lot of messages that were sent to the community. I will pick two of them. Just first thing, member states were super clear. Proactive administration. So we have to work, think about the future of the SDG, but taking that into account. I would say the second also very strong message that we got was we have to transition to a document-free single market. So with under the single digital gateway, with the once-only technical system, so we will be able to exchange a lot of things, but documents. And the message is that we have to go to the next phase, data. That's something which is important, and it has an impact on the way the system will work. Because if we are talking about data, if we're also talking about proactive administration, so it means that we are not sharing documents, we are not retrieving documents, but we are granting access to data. That's something which is important. Overall, I would say that we try to structure, I would say, our work on the single digital gateway, and I have keywords, 4 keywords. First, implementation. The single digital gateway has made considerable progress, thanks to member states. Of course, the Commission supports, but the bulk of the work is the member states' work. And I can say that I'm very proud of this community because there are a lot of hard-working people, and I can see here a couple of them. So I can thank you for the hard work you're doing just to make that happen. So we'll have to continue working on implementing the SDG. Second, looking a bit more also at the future, so we think that we should expand the single digital gateway to new needs, new areas. The single digital gateway is very much related to the single market. It has a very comprehensive approach, but we know that there are new proposals that are regularly put forward by the Commission, and we always try to connect these new proposals, provided, of course, that they are relevant, with the single digital gateway, because we want this SDG to be the central tool, just to help manage, I would say, the single market expansion. Third, modernization. So we also have to inject new technologies. Miko, you mentioned AI, for example, but that's, of course, something that we have to inject as much as possible in the system. And we have also, I would say, a fourth line of action and thinking, which is about what I would say integration. There are a couple of systems that have similar functions, and I think that we have to build bridges between these systems. We have to ensure that there is a certain convergence between these systems for a simple reason, because maintaining systems, different systems, is costly. It means a lot of money for member states. So if we can work together just to build bridges and to ensure a certain degree of convergence, I think that we are going to bring a lot of benefits. So voila, these are the main directions: implementation, expansion, modernization, integration, if I may summarize. And of course, we have to populate these categories with a lot of exchange with the community and with you.
Thank you. Very ambitious. And indeed, it's really, I think what you're saying is that each time there is a new cross-border public service. That makes sense. It could be part of the single digital gateway. And I think in Ireland, Tony, you've been looking at actually those services to be set up for live events within Ireland that immediately will have maybe a cross-border element. What is the next phase you're looking at? Or are you thinking of proactive, or you really think that we need to still get the basics right, I think, right?
Yeah, I think we have to walk before we can run, and I think it's important to say that, if you don't mind me saying so, with the greatest respect to everybody here, you made a point there, Mark, about Europe is not so, doesn't have a reputation for being so much a leader of innovation in this area yet, but we're strong on the regulation, and we have, as you will understand, to align several regulations now. We have to align the Single Digital Gateway regulation with the European Digital Wallet regulation with the Interoperability Europe Act. That doesn't necessarily have given much thought to what it's like for the frontline user and the usability of these solutions. And that's our approach here, which is to first and foremost make sure that we're developing solutions at a national level that are highly usable. And to that we need to be more innovative. We need to have, be willing to look to what really good looks like. And if we get those working, and we are working actually at a national level to reconcile the three, and David, you'd be interested maybe in the work we're doing around live events with the Single Digital Gateway and the digital wallet to make them look seamless, because we haven't seen anywhere else in Europe quite crack that yet. But we've got an approach that we think that works, and what we're doing is first and foremost making sure that it looks easy to use. That's the first thing. The second thing we're doing is an agile approach to about 5 building blocks, and I'll just quickly list them because I think they'll be of interest. One is digital identity, one is data collection, one is payments, one is messaging, another is managing cases, and then the last one is credentials and the wallet. Our view, and this isn't a view on our own, if you look at what's happening with the GovStack initiative internationally, there are about 5 to 7 key building blocks that we all need to collaborate on to build the public infrastructure and the approaches that we need. So what we're doing is we're doing user-centered design, agile development on these key building blocks to work for national purposes and interoperability at national level, and internationally second. And actually one more building block I should have mentioned, which is the information mediator. So what we're doing is we're trying to make sure that any work we do at an interoperable level, at a national level, can be reused for the Single Digital Gateway. And so this combination of focus on user-centered design and agile development of these half a dozen building blocks, we think is the essential foundations before we can then build the more proactive services where it becomes, a little bit, where the magic comes in with a little bit of AI, but the foundations have to be solid.
Absolutely, and I'm really glad you said this. By the way, it's a very, very impressive also user experience when you look at the way how Ireland has put forward these live events. With these building blocks, clearly getting authentication as a main building block, the data. We've already heard a few for the future discussion. What about you, Mark? How do you see the next phase? Are we really looking at already proactive or government automated services, or is there something we still need to get right before we get there?
I think my personal priority, and I think priority for many governments, should be how to get government on a smartphone. Now, if you look back not that long ago, in 2013, most of the internet, and I'm talking about more than 80% of internet web traffic, was consumed through desktops. Today is the opposite. Large majority of web traffic is consumed by smartphones. So this is the shift that very few governments have been able to do. And it's a technological shift as well as a mind shift. And that's why I think building or implementing government super apps that help you access any kind of digital public service you need in seconds, not minutes, is crucial. And I will mention DIA again, because I think it's the example of how to get a government super app right. And let me share some numbers. So today, DIA is used by over 20 million Ukrainians. It offers more than 30 key government services that range from, welfare all the way to crisis response, e-democracy. It also serves as a digital wallet and document, which means that you can identify yourself with the app. You do not need to carry any kind of physical documents around any longer. Over 90% of newborns in Ukraine are registered with the app, and you can basically open up a business using this app in less than 10 minutes. And a fun fact, during the last FIFA World Cup, millions of Ukrainians were watching their team play on their government super app. So this is the kind of transformation and shift that we need to achieve to get closer to customers. And I think, in this case, our customers are citizens. And I think the area where government has usually been quite bad at is user experience. Now, when you open DIA, as I said before, it looks like it's been designed by Apple or Google. And they've done a deliberate effort, not just to make it as secure as possible for obvious reasons, but to make it as seamless and beautiful as possible. And I think when I was a minister, oftentimes you don't even know what other ministries in your government are working on, let alone what other countries around you are up to. And I think we, as European countries, we too often fall into a trap of reinventing the wheel, of rediscovering America every time with every service and so on. And that's why I really appreciate the Commission's effort to basically collect the best practices and make sure that basically we can multiply, or let's say scale, good solutions across the Union and beyond. So I would really put the mobile government as a top priority, and if we get this right, then I think we'll be able to move to AI-powered solutions and all the, fancy, hyped-up buzzwords that everyone's talking today. But first, let's get the basics right.
Thank you. And so far I've heard, I think we heard move from document to data, so paperless government. That's a big first. Then we get the live event by building blocks approach, mobile delivery of government services. But I think both Pedro and Mika, you will have something already concrete in terms of going towards proactive government. So perhaps, Mikko, you want to explain what you're already doing among the Nordic countries in terms of proactive government services?
Yes. Great question. Somehow we are seeing that the development of digital services is saturating. So we have the basic infrastructure already there. So messaging, authorization, basic payments, maps, and so forth. And of course, the thing that we believe is the next big thing are these cross-border digital services and related to live event services. So we know that in Norway they have 7 live events, Denmark 16, Estonia 10, and so forth. So we are seeing that all these countries up in north are currently developing live event services. And of course, as we know, travel, health, studying, these happen in the closing or in the neighboring countries. So we should definitely promote and help people on accessing their services in different nations. So of course, this is something utmost important for us. I would love to say that we would like to have services with no touch or zero touch principles, but somehow there is still so much to do that we can proclaim that these are really no touch or zero touch services. That's always a vision for us, and we definitely want to do that kind of services. But for the end user, there is always the legal aspect. So if the service is done on behalf of me, and I haven't, said anything how it's going, so it might be against his rights or will. So in that sense, we might be a bit careful on how to push these zero-touch or no-touch services, because we want that people are still making like active decisions based on their rights and so forth. So coming back to your question, so of course countries where they have already built, like let's say for example setting up a company, so then there's a definitely a possibility for cross-border digital services. So how to help a person from Sweden to start a company easily in Finland or vice versa. So these kind of like activities we will definitely try to move forward, and thanks to the European community we are getting lots of like ideas and benchmarking from different member states. So these kind of like events are fascinating and great places to share these insights. So then I hand it over to Pedro.
Thank you. In Portugal, we see that the delivery of public services, the way people want them to consume them, and that's the reason we are investing in digital. It's not for providing digital services. We want to provide the digital infrastructure that can allow us to deliver the service the way the citizen wants. If it's face-to-face, fine, but it's based on a computer that is put in service of the clerk for doing the service digitally. If it is an app, fine, perfect. No, we find that some people are they don't want to use digital, they want to be able to communicate face-to-face, and even younger people that use their phone for WhatsApp, TikTok, and all other social networks I'm not a member of, because I'm from Facebook, yeah, the age of Facebook. And this is the reason we are investing on digital services on the background. Mainly, of course, on the basic EU building blocks we are putting together, and mainly investing also in interoperability between systems. The reason is we don't want to ask, of course, neither you, information from the citizens that the government already has. And I think that in the past, because of digital, we started to doing services more complex and more complex, because we can ask more, we can be more, we can have a more certain, we can provide a better service if you provide more information. And we made the services a lot more complex. But also with digital, we are able to simplify the life of citizens. And we have some, I will give you 3-4 examples of how we did that. We have an energy social fair in Portugal. We also have internet access social fair. So for people that don't have the income, they have some kind of condition on social security. We have a law that allows them to have a lower fare for energy and a lower fare for internet access. And in the beginning, people had to go with papers and say, I have this income, I have this condition, social security. And what we observed is that the service was achieving only 10% of the population that we were trying to reach. And then we started to using the citizen cards, the digital citizen cards, so they would put the citizen card or the mobile ID, and they would allow us to change information. And that improved the things a little bit, but sometimes the problem is communication. I don't know, perhaps I don't know how to use the EID on my phone, or perhaps I don't know if the service is there. It's very hard to communicate services for citizens, because governments have lots of services. And in the end, in 2015, 2017, we provided a zero service. Every time a citizen registers for having a new energy provider, in the background, without sharing information about the citizen, the company receives 2 yeses or 1 yes and 1 no from tax department and for social security. And then, depending on the answers, they automatically provide, for instance, this social tariff for the citizen. So this normally is, the goal is to provide low income, low internet access persons, so less access to information, a way to improve, to gather, to have their benefits automatically given. Of course, there is a catch. The catch is I can provide it, but they can refuse. They can refuse. But if they don't refuse, they will have the better tariff for internet and energy. Another example was during pandemics. I think in moments of crisis, everyone excels. And for instance, we had this problem with renewing the digital ID, our citizen card. And what we've done, we've started to looking at the renewal dates, and we started sending a message saying, if you pay the service, using this reference, you automatically, in your home, will receive your digital ID. So, of course, ensuring security of the system, but this allowed us during pandemics, to have people at home and not visiting the counters in public services. What we are doing, for instance, in Justice, I've referred before, but Justice in Portugal has registries and also the citizen card, the ID, and we also have courts. For instance, in courts, when I have a problem with a court or something, automatically I can be checked if I'm allowed to have a government aid or a government lawyer for helping me in my case. And this way, we think that we are allowing more people access to justice. So, because most of the times, people that are low income or whatever, they don't know what are their benefits, what they can ask for the court system. And so we are providing them automatically also the aid. They can refuse, of course, if they have a lawyer or means to have a lawyer, but we are providing these citizens a lawyer that is financed by the government for having better access to justice. So these are some kind of examples that we are trying to implement. Of course, there are challenges, and I think we'll speak a little bit about this challenge afterwards, that are related with the availability of data, of opportunity, because we have lots of maturity stages on our entities, on our agencies, and no one is always open to make changes for allowing interoperability between systems or allowing for data interchange, so we can develop further and further these services. So, but this is a topic that I think we'll discuss later.
Absolutely, and thank you. Very interesting, as you heard. So with some of the proactive services you mentioned are in fact facilitating inclusion, because you're actually looking at people who don't know that this service is available, or they don't know if they're entitled to that, and government, without sharing too much data, just a yes or no, will inform the company to actually give them that service proactively, of course with their decision. So I appreciated that comment as well, Mikko. So maybe I'll ask the colleagues to show if there are questions on Slido, but just on this slide so we don't disturb the audience. And in the meantime, while we're looking at whether there are some interesting questions coming up, only friendly, as we just said, but of course can be creative and intriguing, I would like to then look at it from a technical point of view. So you've all looked at, what could be the next phase, but what are the kind of interoperability or digital enablers, solutions that are needed to get there? And do we have some that we know we would need it, but it's not there yet? Do we actually have to think about developing those? I'll start with you, Mikko, perhaps, as a first respondent.
Yeah, this might be still a bit futuristic because AI is still emerging technology. But the essential question that we have been thinking is that how we will be getting the end users, either private or business users, trusting the system. Because now when a government makes a decision, it's based on some person's judgment, which is based on certain criteria. But when the machine comes into the equation, so how we will be getting the trust from the end users that these automated systems, either RPA or AI-based systems, will be trusted. And that's something that we would definitely be interested considering in the European-wide system, because of course Finnish government could trademark AI trust for our decisions and say that this is totally okay, but most likely we need a, let's say, like a European-wide standardization system that can reclaim that this is truly trusted service, although it's the decision is made by AI or some automated system. So the AI trust is truly something that I think that we have enough time to consider how to do this kind of like trademarks or standardization, but still to help the end users, private or business users, to trust the system as they trust today the human-based government as such.
Thank you. Very, very interesting, and also timely with the creation of the AI office and obviously the registry that will already be there to capture those high risk cases. And I wanted to mention earlier, you have also mentioned APIs, which are an important building block and identification. Maybe I'll ask you then, Tony, what are the kind of building blocks that you work with, or you think we should still develop to get to the next phase?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the key question. If you have to get into the technical detail here to address interoperability, which we do, and it's a challenge. You know, there's a lot of common ground here, but there's also, you know, everybody doing it slightly differently, and we're as guilty of that as anybody. But if you look at the Nordic Institute for Interoperability in X-Road, that's obviously led the way in many ways. We've tried to look at that. It was not as easy to reuse as we wanted, so, you know, that was an issue. The single digital gateway's got its dummy bus, which is good, but it also has areas to improve. The Ukrainians are leading the world in one area. The Indians are leading in the world in a similar area with the digital wallet. We're all trying to, you know, do something in a similar space, but there isn't enough of a community around any one of those building blocks yet to make it to change the game. I think Europe has to learn from the open source world here. That, you know, we have to develop building blocks that are not just useful at a European level, but are useful internationally, and try to, as you said, Mark, you know, lead the world, if you like, in these building blocks, you know, but aim them internationally. I think we have focused particularly on what we call the information mediator. That's the GovStack terminology for X-Road and the single digital gateway, and it's we're using one from Apache Camel. It's got a big international community around it. We think that that's one building block that probably could be much more broadly used by everybody in Europe. But what I think we need to do is start with that one, particularly because interoperability inevitably ends up with questions about APIs. You know, it's difficult to do any interoperability without some discussion on APIs. I don't think we have yet cracked a easy to onboard your API toolkit across Europe yet. I mean, it should be possible for us. I mean, there are tools out there, but I don't see that it's easy enough for us to take a toolkit and share the word across our country and say, this is how you onboard your API. We're just not there yet, and we need to. But once we do, then that model and methodology becomes replicable across the whole of the European Union. Now, I'm happy to be educated by saying that there may be a better toolkit than we've seen, but I think we're all kind of trying to co-create that at the moment, and this is where the Commission could help us kind of foster that kind of collaboration around that single building block, around an information mediator, around API exchange.
Thank you. Information mediator, API exchange, and have the community behind, going towards maybe a GovStack type of approach, which I think you know also a lot about. What do you think, Mark, are the next big building blocks that we should focus on?
So let me first respond to the comment on the AI. I think there are two types of AI or Gen AI systems. Type number one is Gen AI trained over publicly available data, like government regulation, office open hours, and so on and so forth. And this is a really low-hanging fruit for any government. And we've seen it in countries like Greece that are already implementing chatbots, that can answer a lot of the questions, or let's say most of the questions that most citizens have about public services. I know for a fact that even non-Greek youngsters use that chatbot to figure out how to study in Greece. And they'll get the response. What they need to do, where they need to apply, what kind of documentation they need to fill out. So this is something I think that shouldn't be controversial and should be adopted anywhere, anytime. The other type of Gen AI is the one trained on private data, meaning on your citizens' data. And here we are touching upon proactive public services, because using AI, obviously, we can make fairly accurate predictions at the population level or at the individual level. Obviously, this is a trickier space, and it will require some more time to basically develop co-pilots that will steer our public servants and government safely into the right direction. But again, let's first start with the basics and implement, chatbots that can help out with very basic or not so basic questions about publicly available information that's usually scattered all across the internet, but it's unified in one AI agent. So this would be, I think, number one. The second thing, and I'll go back to the beginning when I said it's super important for us to establish a vibrant GovTech ecosystem. And I'll go, a step further and say we need a single European GovTech market. And it won't happen in itself. It will happen with some support, not just from the member states, but also from Brussels. And what I'm proposing, I hope it's not too controversial, is to establish the European GovTech Fund that will invest in GovTech startups and scale-ups. Again, funding for this kind of ventures is a problem. Investors prefer to invest in ventures that are offering faster returns. So there's a clear case for a public intervention. We have, European Defense Fund. We have a number of, dedicated funds in other areas, and I believe we need one also in the GovTech area. This is one thing that we can do in Brussels. The second thing is something that our member states can do, meaning they have to shake up the procurement processes and regulations. Currently, these are some of the most rigid regulations out there. Big organizations and government in particular love to work with other big organizations. That's why the GovTech market is dominated by big system integrator kind of companies that mostly aren't even European. And I'm not saying that we need to change that overnight, absolutely not. But we should be dedicating a part of our procurement funds to solutions that come from our own innovation community. So this would be a concrete proposal from my side. And lastly, let me also mention that we need to upskill our public servants, not just the ones in the procurement departments, but elsewhere as well. I'm a firm believer in insourcing before outsourcing, because only competent public servants can be confident enough to work with startups, because it's not easy and it carries risk. But the easiest thing to do is to just call one of the big tech companies out there to do something for you. We need to cross that divide, which means that we need to be flexible with remuneration of public services with profiles that are much needed for digital transformation of our governments, to make an exception here and there, to make sure we attract top talent. It still won't be easy, but currently in many countries, it's just impossible to get very good data scientists, to get very good AI experts, to get very good IT engineers in general. And this would be, I would say, a homework for our national governments. So if we do any of these three things, but if we do all three of them together, obviously we can go a long way, and over time, we'll have governments that are inspired by innovation from within and from the outside, from European innovators. And I think that's the destination that we want to come to.
Thank you so much. Music to our ears. A European fund for GovTech, and obviously procurement you mentioned is something that seems to be a blocking factor, although there are possible ways to now use, for example, design contests and other innovative procurement measures and skills. You've really touched upon some of the main points.
If I can just add one thing, and this is what I heard for a couple of GovTech entrepreneurs. What they're saying is, don't give us pilots, give us contracts.
Yeah.
We've had enough of pilots. Everyone is piloting all kinds of solutions just to keep them happy. They need deals, they need contracts, they need solutions that are implemented, that are working, and that benefit the citizens as well as them.
Clear message. Thank you. And you've mentioned also the idea of virtual assistants, chatbots that many countries are now implementing. I know in Portugal as well you have that. But beyond that, you have some suggestions for building blocks that we still need or you think are absolutely necessary to move to the next phase of digital government?
Yeah, I think one thing that I'm trying to resume perhaps what everyone said. If you are trying to do things like the way you have been doing all your life, you'll be getting the same results. Mm-hmm. So if you are developing services with big tech and you are getting poor uptake from citizens, you'll be getting poor uptake from citizens. And so we implemented the GovTech strategy for justice. And for instance, one of the first results was this chat-based, I think was the first implementation of ChatGPT when it was made public from a public organization. So we try to solve all the dots and questions from citizens, and we are not providing services at this time. We are thinking about it, but we are not providing. We did it with a startup that in 3 months, in 1 month, they were struggling with the products. In 3 months, we had the products available for citizens. We are still improving it, of course, but I think we have to do things differently in procurement, in budgeting, and in many aspects of government lives, so we can improve this. Regarding artificial intelligence, we are now trying to understand, for instance, when we are talking about interoperability, because one of the main problems we have in interoperability and with zero services is that most of the times our organizations, they are in different stages. They are renewing an old platform. They don't have budget for doing that. They don't have resources, and resources is a very big problem, technical resources, for continue developing better public services. And sometimes, last week I was in a meeting with Social Security. We had 3 afternoons for discussing 20 interoperabilities. And in the end, we had a calendar for 5. And these 5, some of them are only be implemented until the next year or beginning next year. And this is very frustrating for us. We want to provide public services. So and better public services. So we are trying to understand, for instance, in the point of view of semantics, if we can apply some kind of AI. Understand, I have a different schema from Social Security at Justice. But perhaps I can have some kind of translators. I can have some kind of a tool that can speed up the process of integration between systems. Or another thing, and this is in implementation phase in Justice, we are investing in a catalog for our APIs. So we are making, because of course we are a ministry, can oblige our organizations to publicize the APIs. We are not expecting them to be all in the same page, but if they are renewing their new, system, they have to publicize the APIs that can be for some kind of help for other organizations to provide better services. And this is the way we are thinking that perhaps we can, from the point of view of the European community, I think we were most of the time thinking in interoperability, or old school interoperability, and perhaps we can accelerate these kinds of APIs. And because with the APIs, then you can discuss schemas, and we can discuss semantics, and perhaps for us also that we are building systems. If we have these schemas and these semantics before, and we can start preparing our solutions for this kind of interaction. Otherwise, and I've been in these kind of projects, will be everyone in different pages, and not always, all of us, we want to provide better services, but we are in different pages sometimes, and this is very frustrating.
Yeah, yeah, and I hear APIs now coming back several times. Maybe David, to you then, what is the kind of big solution, interoperability or digital solution that you think would be necessary for the next phase of the single digital gateway, that is necessary, or is there planned, or should be developed?
Thank you, Andrea. That's a very difficult question for DG Grow. It's mainly a question also for DGIT, if I may. You know, the Commission is a big family, and for the SDG, we have a partnership between DG Grow and DG DGIT. But now, joking apart, I would say, the SDG is a big user of existing solutions. That's the first thing. And probably it's one of the best in the class. eIDAS, e-delivery, for example, core vocabularies. So the SDG builds on that, and many more. So that's definitely, I would say, a policy choice. We reuse what is being developed, the building blocks that will ensure also interoperability and so on. So that's, I would say, a key line of action. It's a real policy objective. So we use. But at the same time also, we develop solutions. We develop, I would say, building blocks. And with our famous common services for the once-only technical system, so I won't enter into the details here, but basically we have now, in this context of the establishment of the once-only technical system, we have a catalog of public sources, registries, evidence type, things that can improve a lot the delivery of digital public services, but that can be reused. So, Tony, you mentioned the U-Wallet a couple of times. This is an example where we can build synergies between the SDG/once-only technical system and the U-Wallet. That's a key objective for us. And by the way, we, DG Grow and DG Connect, with DGIT, just to remain a bit within the Commission, but we work with member states on the synergies between the once-only technical system and the U-Wallet. So we have that, we developed that, and I would also mention that we are quite active on the development of standards for data exchanges. Because if we want to move to a document-free single market and transition to data exchanges, of course, we will need this data, and I see here Pavlina with working on that. So that's our contribution. So we are users, but also we are developers of, I would say, solutions and building blocks that can be reused. And when we talk about data exchanges, so don't forget that the SDG is a cross-domain, a cross-sector framework and instrument. Of course, from our perspective, it's related to the single market. It covers what we say 21 administrative areas. Okay, these covers many procedures. So that's, I would say, also a major contribution from the single digital gateway, from the work of member states to an interoperable Europe and to creating also new building blocks that can be reused by others.
Absolutely. And I'm really happy you mentioned them all, and then you also mentioned the data models, for example, if you want to move from document-based to data-driven exchange of information and in the context of the single digital gateway. And I'm really happy you mentioned also the idea of reuse. I think one of you have already mentioned it, because that's really also one of the main essences of the Interoperable Europe Act, right? If you remember, there is this strong element of share and reuse to allow an administration to actually ask an administration to share an existing solution, and that obligation for that administration to share it with another unless it's under certain IP rights or security issues. And I think with that, by the way, there is a session on share and reuse just after this one. So the idea is to, let's not reinvent the wheel, like you were saying. If there can be some solutions packaged also in a stack manner that can be modular and reused, then let's focus on those. So I'll ask again the colleagues, perhaps there are questions from the audience through Slido, is that possible to see? And if not, I will have a question for you, but oh, yeah, maybe you still want to ask your question. There is a question from the panel.
Well, I don't know, is it the question, but there's an old saying that dreams are sad little things without plans. Mm-hmm. So could like the cross-border by default be one of the joint plan for all member states while developing or building new digital services? So that might be some kind of joint plan that we could share.
That's lovely. And I think what you will find is that we've done a study, I must be now about 10, 15 years ago in the Commission, that looked at the cost-benefit of actually starting with cross-border in mind, and the additional resource needs to go from just digital to actually cross-border is minor. So if we can have that mindset from the start, obviously with the interoperability assessments for those services that have a cross-border data exchange will have to be done. But in general, to make that happen, that's resource-wise not a huge extra resource effort. So thank you for that. Maybe then I'll come also to questions to you. What do you think the SEMIC community and or the Commission should do or could do to move to the next phase? You've already said the fund, so I'll start with you. You seem to have some ideas for us. What is it that we could do to make this happen, this next phase of digital government?
So I would say, besides everything that's been said, and I support everything suggested by my colleagues, I would say maybe just to add to the discussion about AI. So the EU just adopted the AI Act. We know what kind of AI systems are legal or permissible. We know which ones aren't. And that should basically bring legal clarity and encourage governments to adopt the safe and regulated AI systems. This dilemma of, can we do this or shouldn't we do it, is now gone. I think this is some kind of legal clarity that we enjoy here in the EU, and not many other countries have it, since this is the first piece of comprehensive regulation. I would also, again, pivot to the innovation part. Now, besides the European GovTech Fund, I would also encourage other European bodies, including the European Institute of Technology and Innovation, as well as the European Innovation Council, to take GovTech into greater consideration. Now, perhaps for a start, adjusting the existing bodies and their budgets to direct some of their resources towards GovTech ecosystem is a better idea. But eventually, we will need a self-standing European GovTech fund. And yes, as you said, let's not reinvent the wheel, and let's export our services abroad. I think, you know, we have an amazing development aid program here in Europe. Europe is the biggest donor in the world. Many of us don't know that. And if we add our digital stack on top of everything else that we're offering to countries in need, this will be a terrific contribution to humanity. And it's not just about making public services more accessible, it's also about cutting corruption, because you simply eliminate the middleman. And that, not just in European countries, but around the world, especially, will go a long way.
Thank you. Tony, any suggestion or any wish for the Commission to do to get there? What is it that we could or the community could do?
Well, I'll build on Mark's idea there. I mean, essentially, I think, you know, whether you take the Single Digital Gateway or the Digital Wallet Interoperability Act, they're all aimed at having an impact at the front line and should be aimed at improving users' lives. I think the GovTech Fund is a good idea. I'd like to see that being used for open source solutions, I suppose, primarily. And I'd like to see us learning from the open source community as to how we can foster some co-development of some of these key building blocks together using that. And I don't think Keith or Miguel are here. You have the OSBO office near you now.
Yep.
So that office should be, you know, given that mandate, I think, to get some of this work going.
That's wonderful. I think you've mentioned it earlier, and I think we know the SEMIC community has been very, very active in getting, you know, some of the semantic work done and maintained, similar to the open source community. So it's something that can definitely be a very big support to get those building blocks co-created and maintained. For you, it's more the community, or even the Commission, if you wish. What would be the next? How could the community of interoperability fans and or the Commission help you get to the next stage?
To complement, or at least to bring my modest contribution, I would say that the Commission could, I'm not the big boss, but could be active in 3 areas, I would say. Political, policy, operational. Political, because we have to bring forward topic. We have to put that on the table. We have to create consensus with member states. We need shared objectives. We need a sense of direction. We need to align actions and activities. That's a role that the Commission has to play. It's institutionally, I would say, its role. And we can do that, continue bringing this topic, putting that on the table for discussion. Policy now, I would say, we should develop a sort of digital-ready policy making. There is no clear definition of what it could mean, but you understand what it could contain. And I think that we can be quite instrumental in doing these type of things. And third, operational. At operational level, we can also contribute, and I will take here a very simple and I think extremely successful example led by our friends from Digit, which are projectatons, these projectatons. So, to help member states implement the once-only technical systems, our colleagues from Digit, with our strong support, but it was an idea coming from Digit, set up these big testing events where we provide support, but the SDG community meets people implementing the solution, having to find concrete solutions, meet over a couple of days, and they can exchange ideas, practices, and so on. And the feedback is excellent. Excellent. We have organized 4 projectatons so far, plus a couple of other events that we call Accelerator. But that's, I would say, a support that we can provide with member states, because of course it's 4 member states that we organize that. So the success of the event is also due to very much the engagement and involvement of member states. But I think that it's something that we have and we should contribute. It's practical. But now we know we can't simply launch IDs and adopt regulations. We also have to be practical because we have to deliver and we have to implement. So political, policy, operational.
Very,
are
very
the
good.
3 levels where the Commission could be active. But again, we are very committed, we are pushing, but it depends also very much on the reactions from member states. So if there is an appetite, then it's far easier for us just to set up, in particular, these, I would say, these schemes to support you member states.
Thank you. And I like that you also mentioned, you specifically picked out the digital ready policy making, which is sort of at the heart of the Interoperable Europe Act and its, let's say, side effect. So thank you for that. And indeed, project-a-thons, and we hear a lot now, let's go into implementation. They're very, very effective means to get there. Pedro, any wish for the community or the commission?
It's getting harder and harder when I'm moving from right to left. So I have to build upon what was said before. I would say that is not digital ready, the legislation. I would say that is digital by default, by principle. That's one thing that we are struggling in Portugal, for instance, in court systems. Normally, regulations are made still for paper, but we are adapting them for digital. But what we are trying to implement now, we are living in a digital court system now in Portugal. So we have to change the minds of who provides the regulation and we are in a digital world for these kind of questions. And that's the reason I say I would improve upon what was said. Another thing is I think the Commission can also provide, everyone has nowadays some kind of building blocks implemented. What we are missing are use cases. Very strong, perhaps vertical use cases in justice, in health. Reinforce this. I know there are some projects on this, but reinforce these use cases. Without use cases, we have technology that is not being used. And I'm reinforcing, I think, what I was saying. And the other hand, recover the topic about procurement, perhaps, regarding of GovTech. Perhaps countries need a sign-off from the Commission, because we are subjected to procurement directives that later we transpose for our systems. And sometimes we are able to, upon some limits, we are able to do whatever we feel it's more transparent, just whatever. But when we are trying to scale up GovTech pilots for solutions, we'll struggle with the limitations on European public procurement. And perhaps that's a thing that we can provide a message to the countries so they can be more flexible, so they can implement more agile solutions in procurement. I feel it's a very big pain for us.
Thank you. And indeed, with our GovTech for All incubator, we're trying to spread the word and spread some good examples. Like I said earlier, the design contest that can work interestingly well in such cases, but it's a very good point. Last but not least to you, Mikko, anything else from cross-border by default principle to be added to the list?
Yeah, of course, you know, we are very grateful on all the hard work that you are doing on behalf of the European community. So that's something that most probably everybody knows and somehow wants to express to you and your colleagues. And having said that, of course, Finland has an aggressive neighbor, and we quite many times have to think that how much of the openness and interoperability we are sacrificing because we have to take into consideration these aggressions that are happening in Europe. But because you are in the heart of Europe, I hope that you can keep up the positive energy on the openness and the interoperability, because if we let these dark thoughts come into our community, so most probably these visions will never be fulfilled. So although there are dark clouds in Europe, so the idea of openness and interoperability is still worth doing it. So thank you for your hard work.
Well, thank you, and thank you. On this note, I think no better note than to end here. Thanks, everyone. Many, many thanks. And indeed, interoperability is a way to the connected Europe, as also Commissioner Hahn has said. So Mikko, Pedro, David, Tony, Mark, thank you so much, and thanks to the audience, and see you around at the event. Thanks very much.